Hello, welcome back to Ukulele 101. Today we're going to be talking about chords, chord charts, tablature, basically everything you need to know to actually play ukulele music and look up ukulele music online and read chord charts, all that jazz, and blues, and pop, and any other genre you can play ukulele in, which is every genre. So, as you'll remember before, we have 4 strings, G, C, E, A. And as you might remember before, this top string is actually not your lowest, which might seem strange if you're coming from guitar or bass or violin, or for that matter. But if you've ever read chord charts for guitar, then it is very much the same deal. A chord chart will have a box like this, and then it will have a line here, a line here, a line here, a line here. And then in between it will have horizontal lines that represent the frets. So once you flip it over this way, your chord chart stays the same, but your instrument, of course, is going to be oriented like this. That line to the far right is going to be your bottom string, this A, and then the line on the far left is going to be your G string, and then the lines between are the C and E. So you'll see little black marks or numbers in between frets, and that represents where you need to put your finger. And if it has numbers, then it goes in order of 1. So your pointer finger is 1, your middle finger is 2, then your ring finger is 3, and then your pinky is 4. And your thumb, I've never had an instance of it being used in ukulele. It's a little strange because your bass string is not on the bottom side, so it's a little harder to use your thumb in ukulele. So for the most part, we just keep it here on the back. So let's learn our first chord. So I use my third finger, at ring finger, for the 3rd fret on this A string, sorry. And this is our C chord. Very simple chord, used everywhere. C major, we love that key. And so, to strum, just use the fingertips of your finger. And if you'll watch as I stand up a little bit. So as I'm going down, my fingernails are brushing the strings, and as I go back up, my thumbnail is picking the strings. And that, if you just mess around with it, get a little comfortable with it, you do want your finger to actually make full contact with the fretboard, but you don't want to be too tight with it, because then it'll create tension and it'll be harder to switch to other chords. Now our next chord we'd like to learn, pause the video here if you'd like to go back and review the C chord, but for now I'm going to move on, is our G. And just a frame of reference, and before I forget, chord charts, if they just have a letter like C or G or B flat, that is included as a letter, because the flat is just what we call an accidental. Then that automatically means it's major. If it has a lowercase m next to it, or sometimes you'll see a lowercase of that letter, so like a lowercase a or lowercase c or something, that means it's minor. If you see numbers next to it, like a 7, that means it's a 7th chord. I'm not going to get into that right now. If it has a 6 next to it, that means it has a 6 in it instead of a 7. There's all kinds of ones. There's 9s and sus4s, but we can get into those in future lessons if we feel so inclined. But for now, if it's just a letter, that means major. If it has an M, it's minor. So, back to C, and now we're going to learn a G chord. So, we're going to have our second finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, then your first finger on the 2nd fret of the C string, then you're going to take that 3rd finger that's hanging out here, and you put it on the 3rd fret of the E string. And then if you strum it, that's your G. And if we go back to C, it will sound like a resolution. So first the G. So that sounds nice if you start on your C. And go to your G. Into C. Now, a variant of the G chord is G7, and it's pretty much the same thing. You have your first 2 fingers hanging out on the 2nd fret of the C and A string, respectively, but you alter your fingering a tiny bit to replace your first finger with your second finger with your 3rd finger, and then your first finger goes on the 1st fret of the E string instead of that 3rd fret as we had before. And that sounds like this. So you might hear that there's a little bit more tension than there was before. But that will make it all the more better when we go back to C. Now, that pretty much covers our first 2 chords. You can find all kinds of songs that just have those 2 chords. But for now, that's all we need to learn. And you know how to read chord symbols now. But let's talk briefly about tablature. So tablature, it kind of looks like a musical staff, if you've ever seen one of those. It has vertical lines, 4. And then on the left, it will have tab, T, A, B. Now, that T, sorry, I wrote it backwards, T, A, B. That T represents the top string, and then the B represents the bottom string, and then the strings in between are the lines in between. And then on those lines, you'll see numbers, which represent the fret number. And tablature is occasionally used for chords, but for the most part, we will be using them for actual melodies. And sometimes the rhythm of those melodies is represented, sometimes it's not. If it is represented, it has lines representing the flags on 8th notes and 16th notes and so on and so forth. But we haven't gotten quite into melodies yet, but just in case you run across it while looking for your favorite song to play, then you know what to do. Alright, thank you so much.